We are still talking about Big Cat Weekend and all that has resulted from it. We're going to go back a little bit in time and talk about a big commitment and flip for the Auburn Tigers. It's just been a great weekend. Let's dive into all that right now. War Eagle, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of E2C Network Live. We are all about the Auburn experience here. Auburn sports, Auburn culture, Auburn family stuff. Basically, the way we say it here, if it's orange and blue, it is what we do. And we thank you for joining us, for being part of this experience. For today's live stream, we have a task to do here that we've been waiting to do because it's just been so crazy with Big Cat Weekend. We are going back a commitment because we did one a little bit earlier, which we'll touch on in a little bit as well. But we have got to talk about the things that you need to know and what it means for Auburn football in regards to the Derick Smith commitment for Auburn football. And of course, the flip from the Alabama Crimson Tide, a huge, huge one that got the Monday yesterday started off on a very high note, leading up to another commitment from Anquon Fegans, who we've already talked about in a previous live stream. So go check that out if you're interested in that. And plenty of other content from that weekend as well. If you're interested, we'll talk about that at the end of the show. But today, our focus is on Derick Smith and the huge, huge commitment, the huge flip for the Auburn Tigers, which has just made Big Cat Weekend just the greatest thing ever. We're going to talk about some of the stuff you need to know about him right now, measurables, where he's from, what he's going to play, all that kind of stuff, what we know, what we think we know right now. Let's talk about it with the context of what we know currently at this time. Then we'll talk about it, what it means. We'll talk about what it means for the class as of the time of his commitment, overall, that type of stuff, what we know right now, how he might factor into playing time, depth chart, what it means for it, like, recruiting pipelines, things like that, and what it could mean for the rest of the class. All of that is included in here. So let's jump into that right now by starting off with the things that you need to know about him. He is another in-state guy for the Auburn Tigers. Huge, huge, huge recruiting cycle for Auburn in terms of taking care of the state. Depending on which site you look at, you're going to see that Auburn is pretty much dominating at this point. Again, more on that in just a little bit. Comes from Selma, Alabama, plays for South Side. Now, Selma is on the west side of the state, which is closer to Tuscaloosa. You would think it'd be more in their territory, which is maybe part of the reason you can understand that Alabama might actually have a leg up on getting this guy in. And in fact, did. Reports are that he was one of the first to commit to Kalen DeBoer being named head coach at Alabama. So one of the things that I think needs to be pointed out from this recruiting process and in the nature of this flip, this isn't somebody that was committed to Nick Saban. This is somebody that committed to Kalen DeBoer. So people could say, well, Nick left, so of course he's going to probably go see somewhere else. No, this is someone that Kalen DeBoer just, had a hand in getting there. And the Tigers came in and scooped him up and convinced him to come to play with the Tigers as opposed to sticking with Kalen DeBoer and the Alabama Crimson Tide. It's just the second flip on the weekend. It's the weekend because it's extended into the week. So obviously that storyline in and of itself is just huge, huge there. So plays for Southside out of Selma, Alabama. He is considered an athlete because of his versatility, although it is expected and has been expressed by him, and it seems like the Auburn coaching staff, that they would primarily like to use him as a wide receiver. If you look at his measurables, you're going to see it listed different sites, different ways, but somewhere in the range of 6'1", 185, approximately 185 pounds, which fits him nicely in a wide receiver category currently. Still time to grow, still time to develop as a player overall. But right now, that does put him nicely in a pretty decent sized wide receiver category for the Tigers. He is a guy that has done very well offensively in high school, but also has done very well defensively, which is why apparently Charles Kelly was part of this recruitment as well, even though they may utilize him as a wide receiver, Marcus Davis being the primary recruiter there. So two of your best recruiters out there right now having a hand in getting this guy here, even if he does end up just playing wide receiver. A guy like this, I'm getting ahead of myself, but you may see him play early. Consensus 4-star across most of the major sites if you guys care about that type of stuff. And so I know that makes a lot of people happy. But that's kind of where we'll see him right now playing. Some of the early storylines around him, obviously the major flip is the big news there, being the second away from Alabama on the weekend, which I know Auburn fans are loving. So that would be the initial things that you need to know right now about him. Watch him in his senior season, and we'll see what else we can take away from that for what the Tigers may eventually be getting if he does sign with the Tigers eventually. Now, let's talk about what it means. Let's start off first by talking about what it means for this recruiting class in terms of numbers. To be honest with you, we're talking about this mainly in reference to the time that he committed. This number that I'm about to give you, some of these numbers will be a little bit different because of the commitment that came after that. We're doing this a little bit backwards. I get it. It's a little bit confusing. But at the time of his commitment, it made 20 overall commits for the class. Auburn at today is currently at 21 because of Anquon Fegans. Now, you also have at that point, at the time of Derick Smith's commitment, 9 from the state of Alabama. It would eventually be 10 by the end of the day. And it just continues to build how important in-state recruiting has been for Auburn in this class and how well they have done with 10 out of the class eventually. This would be the first, unless I looked incorrectly, the first wide receiver, if that's what he ends up playing in the class, although he's still listed as an athlete, which makes sense that you would have very few wide receivers at this point because you brought in the Freeze 4. That's quite a talent that's going to be he's going to have to compete with, have to go up against when he arrives. Speaking of which, let's go there since we've talked about the class a little bit, how that breaks down. Let's talk about the depth chart, who may or may not be here. That helps us kind of figure out how he factors into this equation if he does eventually sign with the Tigers. So right now, the way I don't look at it necessarily is who's starting or things like that, but what is the graduation rate, or what is the, not rate, but who's leaving, who's going to potentially be leaving that we can at least make educated guesses at. You got Keandre Lambert-Smith, who just came in as for his final year of play. So did Robert Lewis. And you could also say the same thing for Sam Jackson as well. So at bare minimum, there are 3 seniors that should be leaving. Heaven forbid any of them have some type of extra eligibility out there that we're not aware of or that they can utilize. So that's 3 spots that are going to open up. So effectively, you could say maybe there's more room to grow. More on that in a second. So he's filling one of those spots, but you've got a lot of talent that is already arriving here, whether we're talking about Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, Bryce Kane, Malcolm Simmons, and then you've got holdovers from previous wide receiver rooms for Auburn, Camden Brown, Caleb Burton, who will likely still be here based on what we know right now. So he's coming into a very full room. But again, this guy is an athlete. You got to find ways to utilize these special athletes. And I think that's part of the allure of getting him here. The fact that we wanted to use him as a wide receiver and the fact that we probably want to get him on the field as quickly as possible and utilize him in some form or fashion. So that's kind of how the depth chart breaks down, maybe what you can expect in terms of his competition. No really things that we can take away about how quickly he might play other than that. In terms of recruiting pipelines and things like that, what does it mean? Obviously, we talked a lot in this stream about Alabama recruiting and how much Auburn has done in the in-state recruiting. You will hear Alabama fans try to moan and complain and make excuses about we went outside. And sure, that's fine. You're more than welcome to do that. But we're going to celebrate taking care of down home here in the state as of this moment, doing so well in that category, even with Derick Smith being a big factor in that. So we've got Derick Smith, who is a huge factor in that in-state recruiting, and we are super proud of as well. You obviously want to make sure you go out to these other areas too and recruit well. Auburn's done that in this class, but 9 at the time of his commitment, 10 overall is a big thing. Finally, what does this mean for the class as a whole, or what does it mean for the class's future? At the time of his commitment, it was 20. It would become 21 by the end of the day. Class is getting pretty full. I would say we're not done yet. There's some people out there we're potentially waiting on some decisions from, even maybe this week, potentially. We'll see. But at the wide receiver position, kind of like we talked about with the depth chart, you just don't know if Auburn is super motivated to just go grab somebody and throw them in there as a wide receiver. You would have the space, losing 3 people after this year, as far as we know right now. So there is space available. So I would not be shocked if there was somebody else that was brought into the fold as an athlete or a wide receiver, somebody that would have the ability to be utilized as a wide receiver, much like with Derick Smith. So, in summary, wrapping all this up, we'll do that one more time here for you guys. But that is the things that you need to know. Those are the things for what it means. While you're thinking about anything from the live stream portion that you'd like to mention or talk about in regards to this commit, please do drop that in right now. A couple reminders for you. If you like this type of content about, especially Big Cat Weekend, boy, do we have it for you. Here are some of the live streams that we have already done for you guys that you should definitely go and check out. Obviously, Hezekiah Harris, Shadarius Tootle, Jermichael Garrett. These were all 2026 editions for Big Cat Weekend. We even did a few others for the 2025 that did eventually come through. And we did not do those for Antonio Coleman, seeing how he has flipped back and forth. And I'm just worried that he's going to do it again, to be honest with you. And we have not done one for our punter who came in as part of that group of five from over the weekend, the actual weekend. If I've got that correct in my head, the math actually be 6 over the weekend, and I guess 8 now total. We did do a full episode of a discussion in our podcast about the weekend that does include all of those commits that happened on the weekend if you like to discuss. And of course, we did Anquon Fegans last night if you're interested in getting information about that. So in summary, brand new wide receiver / athlete to the 2025 class, brings a lot to the table for the Tigers and continues to build the in-state recruiting. That class is getting full. But of course, as Trevon Reed would always say, we ain't done yet. Thank you guys so much for watching and tuning in, whether you watch live or on the replay. We appreciate you being here and being part of our little family within the Auburn family. Until we talk to you again, War Eagle.